Okay, well, we've had a look at the trigger and the financial crash, but what would things be like after a few days? Now, we've identified this as rather a crucial point. Will the authorities get a grip? This is the question. On the positive side, they could do. What would the government be doing if they did? Well, they would be taking over the banks. There would be maximum daily withdrawals immediately from cash points. National currency controls, probably best set in before the crash. They would be printing and distributing cash to banks to make sure that there was enough available. Food would be distributed. There'd possibly be overprints of the euro notes in other parts of Europe. But on the negative side, there may be an escalation on the military side, false flag attacks and this kind of thing. There may be panic and bad analysis. In other words, a lot of stuff coming through the media which is really trying to divert the blame for this. Also, state of emergency possibly even coming in quite quickly. Even an invasion and war breaking out in the Middle East. On the negative side still, I mean, it may be that there's a long time before we can get at any cash. There may be looting and civil unrest quite quickly, possibly even guns on the streets and mob rule. Whereas, in that case, people would immediately pretty much start bartering and sharing things. We may even have the institution of Emergency Powers Act, Martin, and Civil Contingencies Act.
Yeah, well, I mean, if you look at what happened in Argentina in 2001, the banks closed, the Corralito, nobody could get their money out. People lost their money, as may still happen in Cyprus. And people did start bartering. There was lots of civil unrest. People looted supermarkets, but eventually it led to political change. And the Kirchner administration, the husband rather than the wife, turned around to the IMF and said, you know what? We're not going to pay the money we owe, and you will negotiate with us about how we're going to deal with this, because otherwise we're not going to pay anything and we'll bring down the entire banking system. They had the backbone to stand up to the bullies in Wall Street and London. Now, ultimately, of course, this is what needs to be done, and we need the political will to stand up to these people.
But the ultimate question, I mean, this is the point at which our two scenarios diverge, Martin. We've got the positive one where the government does get a grip, and a negative one where everything starts running out of control. What's your prediction there?
Well, I have to be honest. Basically, I think if you're honest, it's likely that this is going to be way out of control and nobody's going to be able to stop it. But we have to have pessimism of the intelligence and optimism of the will. World wars tend to actually force people to confront reality.
Okay, the next stage is after a few weeks. New currencies would start forming, possibly even currencies like the Bristol pound might start becoming circulated if there's no cash around. Things like McDonald's vouchers, food vouchers, which are valued at food banks, suddenly these things start to become currency. But then there, of course, would be, after a few weeks, waves of bankruptcies, as the banks would be calling in security to try and recapitalise themselves, and many companies going bankrupt, probably apart from the big multinational chains. There would be mass layoffs, mass unemployment, and most people would simply not be able to pay the rent or mortgage. That's when things start getting difficult.
It does, yeah. I mean, what we really need is, as Michael Meach was saying in the first hour, we need a Franklin Delano Roosevelt, which is exactly what Obama should have been. He's been elected twice now. He's the guy that should have been putting all this in place, ready to go. But of course, he's in the pocket of the bankers like they all are, and nothing has been done, which is why it'll probably play out on the negative scenario rather than the positive scenario. The positive scenario required effort to have been made already, and it hasn't been done.
Well, we don't know that. Maybe they have worked on some of this at the Treasury.
They haven't done anything. They haven't done any of the necessary things. I mean, we've just been hearing from our colleague there about the total lack of regulation in the City of London. We've had 4 years to get something in place, and nothing's been done.
Okay, well, more long-term recovery. If this is really, we're talking months and years after, working with the BRICS countries, doing big building projects, getting people back into work through government spending on infrastructure, building houses. But I mean, ultimately, it looks like we may have to have a government-run kind of socialist world until private businesses are able to build back up again. Either that, or much of our life will be run by private multinationals.
Now, the problem is the system is chaotic to the point where it can't survive. Capitalism is going to die. The question is what comes after capitalism. It's a dead donkey. You can beat it with a stick, but it ain't going to get up. And of course, the powers that be have deluded people for the last 4 years that capitalism's still alive. I've got a secret to tell you. It's not alive. It's dead already.
Well, that's it. You've just heard our question. What would a major euro-dollar crash look like? And you've had a couple of scenarios there. First, with the trigger for it. Secondly, with the actual crash itself. Thirdly, after a few days, what it would look like. Then after a few weeks. Then after a few months. And finally, the Treasury can't say they didn't have a plan. We just broadcast it.
Drive Time on BCFM 93.2.